Thank you very much. To begin, let me say I am not a zealot. I don't have an agenda here. I am an attorney, a practicing securities attorney, so I approach marijuana business from that perspective. I represent a lot of public companies. We help advise them, and in connection with marijuana, I become an adjunct professor teaching at Hofstra University School of Law, the first law class in the country entitled Business and Law of Marijuana. People ask me why I actually got started in the marijuana space, and it's a quick story, and I'll tell it to you because there was this bank that was trying to raise money for a company. They invited me to do a due diligence trip in Colorado. I said, I'm not interested, it's all BS. They said, no, I'm serious. I said, no, am I? So am I. And then they said the magic words every lawyer likes to hear, I'll pay. So then I did the due diligence trip in Colorado, and I came back and I saw that it actually is a bona fide, a real industry. However, it's an industry fraught with all kinds of peril, because as you know, it is illegal federally, yet legal on the state level, and there are some local levels where it's not legal. So there are all kinds of issues, and again, I'm really here to tell you the problems, the issues, things for you to be mindful of. In my class, which I'm wrapping up the semester, basically all we do is ask questions, not like a typical law school, but because there are no answers, okay? And you're going to see what I mean very shortly. We've heard the Schedule 1, the Controlled Substance Act, enacted in 1970, defines marijuana as a Schedule 1 controlled substance. It makes it illegal under federal law to manufacture, distribute, or dispense, or possess with intent to manufacture, distribute, or dispense marijuana. Pretty clear. Schedule 1 means the drug has has high potential for abuse and no currently accepted medical use in treatment. Now, you've heard earlier that there are medical benefits that people are coming out with now with marijuana. What most people don't actually know is that the United States government has a patent on THC. And in connection with, you know that?
Yes, the gentleman here.
See, I missed that part, okay. Yeah. So everybody already knows. Pardon?
They don't have it on THC, they've got cannabis.
They have it on THC too in the 19. They have it on, maybe it's not THC, but they have it on cannabis. But in connection with that, they show the functionality. So the point is, while on the one hand it's a Schedule 1, they show there is no functionality, there's no benefit, but yet there is a patent in connection with it. And there's also a lot of reports that have been coming out and saying that there are benefits of it as well. And as you've already heard, Schedule 1 is heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and marijuana, all at the same level. Schedule 2 has a high potential for abuse and has currently accepted medical use, but there are issues with it, which is cocaine, Oxycontin, Adderall, and Ritalin. And to me, what's important about that is really when you look at it, the context is how does heroin, LSD, ecstasy equate with marijuana? And I don't know how much of the history people have gotten into with this, because I apologize for getting here late, but it really was part of the Ainslinger campaign. And has everybody seen the video of Reefer Madness? Does everybody know about Reefer Madness? Okay, and that really is who's never seen the video of Reefer Madness? Okay, you want to just put it, it's a minute and 50 seconds. You will see this was put out by the United States government, and this was really the epitome of the propaganda that was set up against marijuana, and really is the backdrop that led to it being a Schedule 1 drug.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance. Innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell.
You have the both business bankruptcy potential. You can't file for bankruptcy. Now, you also have, the Department of Justice. Okay, that was a real quandary where what do you do when the federal government says it's illegal and states are actually legalizing it? So you have you have the Cole Memorandum, which probably will hear a lot about, or you should hear a lot, and that Cole Memorandum basically sets forth 8 items which must be complied with for the federal government to say they won't interfere and enforce federal law. Because remember, there's not a lot of times where federal law is in contrast to state law, which is exactly what you have here. So basically, the Cole Memorandum is a way in which Congress has, the Cole Memorandum, which is a memorandum from the Department of Justice, is an acknowledgement that Congress still considers marijuana a controlled substance, treats it very seriously, but is trying to reconcile how to utilize its limited federal resources to enforce it. Now, recently being this week, Loretta Lynch is our new Attorney General. She has come out and said she is opposed to marijuana. Eric Holder, our outgoing Attorney General, was supportive of it. It'll be interesting to see what effect, if any, she has. But all of these businesses that are getting into the marijuana space, they run the risk of, A, if the government changes tomorrow, can it outlaw it entirely? Okay? If the government tomorrow, under Loretta Lynch, can enforce the Cole Memo, which basically, or can it abolish it and say, we will enforce all federal violations of the law. So if you are a state and you are permitting the sale of marijuana, which is a controlled substance, the federal government now, as the law stands today, can come in and shut you down. The reason they're not doing it, amongst other reasons, is because the Cole Memorandum was a promulgation by the Department of Justice saying if you comply with 8 points, we won't bother you. And those 8 points are preventing the distribution of marijuana to minors, preventing revenue from the sale of marijuana to gangs, preventing going from state to state, and the 6th one, which is my personal favorite, is preventing drug driving and the exacerbation of other adverse public health consequences associated with marijuana use. Now, that is one of the most nebulous, amorphous statements. But basically, if it's determined, and I saw the chart saying that the accident rates in Colorado are going down, I'm not sure that, there's some people have a different interpretation, and some people think now, because now people are allowed to say they're on marijuana, it is actually going up or whatever it is. But if it could be proven, pardon?
Those from the Washington Post.
Okay. But if it can be proven that there is more drugged incidences now of driving, technically you're in violation of the Cole Memorandum, and the federal government can come in and close down your operations. And the problem you have is it's so difficult to understand what that really means, it leaves it uncertain. You also have the issue of the banking, because banking is, as you probably know, one of the largest issues for the marijuana business. And the banking basically says that since, again, it's a controlled substance, it is illegal to be in the business, you are finding more and more situations where the banks, it's called the SARS report, the Suspicious Activity Report, where if the bank believes you're in the marijuana business, they have additional compliance, anti-money laundering, and other obligations that they must do. I was at a conference last week, and a public company today turned around and said they're one of the few public companies that state that they touched the plant, because touching the plant is it being in the business, and it's a federal crime to be in the business, and the SEC is a federal agency that regulates it. So while the states can say you can do it, and if you're not a public company, you're not involved in the federal government, you're really registered and licensed and operating in the state. But once you file with the SEC public documents, then you fall under the auspices of the federal government. So one of the first public companies that has said they acknowledge they touched the plant also now has to tell their investors they don't have a bank to accept their money. And as you can imagine, that triggers all kinds of issues, because in Colorado, for example, there's tons of cash. People paying taxes in cash. People are getting held up. There's a private industry for security guards and everything else like that. You cannot bank, and that's a giant issue. And that is based upon the February 14, 2014 FinCEN memorandum, which articulated the same 8 points that the Cole Memorandum had to make sure that you can legally bank. And there are all kinds of, banks have originally been set up for this purpose, and the federal government doesn't know how to handle this issue because it really is a complicated issue. The SEC with public companies, typically, when the SEC, when you file a registration statement to get securities in your public company registered, after you clear all comments, you file an acceleration request. And the SEC says you can be effective, this registration statement can be effective within 48 hours of clearing comments. The SEC is not doing that if the word marijuana or cannabis appears in the statement in the business, but instead is allowing these companies to go public by operation of law, meaning that after you clear all comments with the SEC, 20 days afterwards, you're automatically effective. And the point of that is the federal government doesn't really understand or doesn't know how to handle the situation because it is such a difficult issue for them to deal with. Where you have, if you're touching the plant, you know, how can they let you go public if it's a federal crime and you are in the federal auspices? There was somebody here who was supposed to speak for Mass Roots, which somebody I think mentioned it earlier. It's basically a Facebook. It's here in Massachusetts. It's a Facebook for cannabis users. The federal government had some substantial issues with them, and Isaac's not here today, but give him credit. He came up with a geofencing mechanism whereby the 23 states, which now is 24 states, because Georgia just made it legal, each one of them would only, his software would only be able to communicate with the other states in which it's legal. Because somehow that was going to satisfy the federal government, because if I'm if I'm in New York and where it is legal, and I'm talking to a state where it's not legal, and I tell them where to buy it, am I implicitly engaged in a conspiracy to facilitate a commission of a federal crime? And all these things seem absurd, and they are, but I'm telling you, these are issues you confront every day. As an attorney, and it's a little bit off track, but as an attorney, you're governed by the state, okay? I'm a New York licensed attorney. So I'm governed by what New York Bar tells me to do. So the New York Bar last year came out with a decision telling me who I can and cannot counsel. And it said because New York recently authorized medical marijuana, I can counsel a client only for medical marijuana. Now Maine, which came up with its decision several years ago, before the 2014 Cole Memo, Maine, it is legal to have medical marijuana. However, it is not legal for a lawyer to advise you on medical marijuana because it violates their ethical duties. And all of these things seem crazy, seem silly, but it really is the world that we're living in where it's just an uncharted territory. People think the federal supremacy should come in and we should enforce it. You've heard that some of the states outside of Colorado are suing Colorado, trying to get it to enforce federal law. In the state of Washington, you have it is illegal federally, it is legal on the state level, and then there's many, many local ordinances and towns where you can't do it. So, I mean, it really is a very confusing situation, and for people getting involved in the business of it, you know, as a federal matter, if you're going to go public with it, you know, you have to figure out what really is your risk, who can you talk to about your risk, and how can you really evaluate your risk. New York, for example, is going to have medical marijuana, but the governor can close it down at any time. So New York is going to ask 5 licensees that can hold up to 4 dispensaries to spend millions and millions of dollars to provide medical marijuana for New Yorkers, which will give you 20 dispensaries for 19.5 million people. Where you have in Arizona, you have 6.5 million people and you have 98 dispensaries. And in New York, when they're going to ask you to place all this money to get it going, you have to make the investment knowing that the governor, Cuomo, who was opposed to it, can end the program at any time, as can the Secretary of Health and the Secretary of Safety recommend that the program be ended at any time. So those are really a backdrop of all the questions that you need to be mindful of as you get involved in the situation. And like I said, there are public companies. It's funny, I saw the certificate, so it really seemed like a perfect opportunity if this is a private company or a public company. If this is a public company and it says Cannabis Corporation of America, probably this company won't be able to get a registration statement effective, won't be able to have a bank account. We'll have to wonder whether or not the federal government's going to come in and impact its business. Now that they have a new attorney general who's opposed to it, will she instruct the people to go in and close down their businesses? Heaven forbids, now, when you do your tax returns, you can't take your deductions, your ordinary business deductions that you would if you were any other business. So your business has to become less profitable. And the irony, of course, to that is, if you want to be lawful and compliant, you're going to be substantially less profitable than the person across the street who is not taking, who is taking the deductions that you would ordinarily take, whether because they know that they can't or because they don't know that they can't, and they're just doing it. And finally, heaven forbids your business doesn't work out, you probably can't file for bankruptcy in the federal court and get protection from your creditors. So now that I was the consummate buzzkill, I'll ask anybody if they have any questions. Yes, my friend.
I really like the fact you got my stock certificate. One of them is on the wall of the lawyer, Sheldon Adelson, who says it's the prettiest stock certificate he ever saw. You didn't realize that was a giveaway stock I gave to each member of my Harvard Business School class and ended up with 220 stockholders. They were able to fund me just fine. The company went down because OxyContin came out and we lost our backing. But that's a real company. It had real lawyers. And he used to work for a government law in Emory. That's the kind of attorneys we had.
You must have misunderstood me. I beg your pardon. I wasn't challenging the company. What I was suggesting to you, if this company was public, I'm guessing your company wasn't public.
You can't go public with a marijuana company.
Well, there are companies that are public with a marijuana company today. And they've turned around and they said they touched the plant. No, they're actually listed companies. But my point wasn't so much, I mean, TerraTac just came out and said they touched the plant. But my point wasn't so much about picking on your company. I think it's a beautiful certificate. I think it's the second nicest certificate. I actually think Disney's is nicer, with all due respect, because they have the pictures on it. But my point is that if you took this company public, what I was trying to illustrate the issues that you would confront.
You think I know it?
I don't know what you know. And yes, please.
So outside of the reality of winning a case against the federal government, if the American people could take them to court for these crimes and make it illegal, what would you as a lawyer say we could charge the federal government with?
Nothing.
I mean, the answer is that you can't sue the government. I mean, someone just recently sued the government trying to ask you to get it descheduled, saying it was improperly scheduled. And the answer is the federal government, the courts have come up and say the government is empowered to schedule as a Schedule I drug. People have challenged the constitutionality of that action, and the courts have upheld it. The real irony is the recourse, if you will, to have is really in the political arena, which is probably where it should be, but I don't want to get controversial here. His hand just popped up when I said that. So, I mean, I think the answer is, it should be in the political arena. Right now, there was a bill, actually a couple of weeks ago, there was the CARES Act that was introduced. It's bipartisan. It was Rand, Booker, and Gillibrand. And that's to propose to take it from a Schedule I to a Schedule II. So then it wouldn't be a controlled substance and have all those consequences. However, what most people haven't thought about is be careful what you wish for, because then all of those recreational facilities still are at issue, because that's just saying it could be used as a medicine. Please.
Hi, so yeah, there's a couple things you got up there. So one, that's only one of 3 bills right now at the federal level. There's another one completely federal, but I guess, so that's one of the things that I brought up, at least when I talked to Bill, and I think a couple other people here, is it's a really tough, challenging thing, being in my mindset where potentially I want to start something related to this, and I don't know what yet. I'm trying to brainstorm or have some ideas, but it's so risky because in 2016 we had a new administration, and they have already changed the Loretta Lynch, and so it's really tough to figure out, like, what of my own personal fortune do I want to gamble and time and potential prison, sentence to do something with this. And I guess there's some things where you just not, like you're saying, not to worry about some of those things, but it's still, I don't know, it's tough, because in some ways I feel like I'm premature trying to get into this, because it really, the law at the federal level almost has to change for me to feel 100% confident.
I have two words for you: picks and shovels. The gold rush, people went out and dug up gold. People who really made the money were the people in the picks and shovels.
Blue teams.
Pardon?
Blue teams. Guys who made the blue teams.
I think picks and shovels too. But so the point is, the ancillary businesses are, most of them are public, and most of them aren't having issues because they're not touching the plant. And so you have these grow things, you have these pipes, and I mean, even when marijuana was illegal, you had all the head shops in New York and Massachusetts. So you had all of those items. So if you're in the ancillary business, not a problem. Shouldn't be a problem. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. And other than that, it is a risk. I mean, I was at a conference, Northern Illinois University asked me to speak at their law symposium, and one of the guys turns around and asked me while I was on the panel, and said, "How do you feel like, you're the guinea pig of, this process?" I said, "You're right. I mean, I could, the question is before, how do I advise a client? What do I advise a client? What are the issues? Don't know." And that's really the part that really is kind of spooky, which is why it should change, and it should change as a political matter. Please.
So you analyze the laws from a lot of different areas and across the country as well. We're kind of in the middle of the tipping point right now. You see us you see the country going backwards from here, or is it inevitably going to happen? You'll see a few, stumbles here and there. People will end up arrested, but for the most part, this industry is moving forward.
My personal opinion, I equate this with gay marriage. Ready or not, here it comes. And I think gay marriage, the states changed the federal law, and I think, really made an impact. And I think marijuana is going to do that. You now have 24 states. Last week I said 23. And I think in the next couple of years, you'll probably have another 7 to 10 on board changing. And I think once you have 35, 36 states, it seems to me it's going to be very hard for the federal government to enforce it. Can they? Probably, but, I think it seems to me it would be hard. The interesting, I read there was a Huffington Post publication where they asked every single candidate their position on marijuana and what, whether they ever smoked it or not. Now, of course, politicians lie and that they're supposed to, that's their job. But the fact that it's getting injected into the debate, I think is excellent. And I think that's really what you want, because I think when you have a majority of Americans who want it, and by the way, the states that are coming on board now, they're all conservative, supermajority Republican states, and they're going to get behind it. And I think once you do that, yes, I think it's going to be, I think the tube or the genie will probably be out. Yes, my friend.
Just so everybody knows, I went to Citizens Bank here in Massachusetts. I told them, I'm going to be running a marijuana business. I need a bank account. They handed me a form and said, sign this form and you'll have a bank account. So if you need a bank account and a marijuana business, go to Citizens Bank, number one. And I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I had heard that the new omnibus drug bill that was just signed by President Obama before he went on vacation to Hawaii included a provision that said that the Justice Department, the DEA, and NIDA were no longer funded for enforcing marijuana laws against medical marijuana establishments in states that allow it.
It was signed in December of last year. It was a communist bill, and yes, that's what it said. Now, would you like me to, that's, yes, so is that
going to affect the industry, or?
No, because subsequent to that, people have been arrested, and the Kettle 5 case in Washington was tried, and somebody was recently telling me, so the answer is yes, it will affect it, but would it give my friend over here the carte blanche comfort that he's looking for? Absolutely not, because it was signed, and there's a lot of Congress people who are pissed off, pardon my French, or irked because it's not being honored. And then somebody has actually recently come up with different interpretation as to why it's not being honored and everything else like that. But it was a very good bill. It was signed December, I think it was December 14th of last year. And but by its own terms, it expires in September of this year.
Right.
Yes.
This is a sort of corollary question. What's your take on the new AG and also the upcoming new head of the DEA in terms of their relationship or their requirement to follow our current president's lead on this?
It's a great question. And, my understanding is the Attorney General works for the President. But this Attorney General has been incredibly outspoken about her position on this. So, on the one hand, I appreciate Obama's desire to one-up Eric Holder and get a black woman, so that's two benefits as opposed to just one. But He's certainly not going to be able to terminate her because I can't imagine if she takes a position that she has maintained in congressional hearings, he's going to fire her. Okay, and just like he could on his way out, deschedule it from or lower it from a 1 to a 2 schedule. But I don't think he'll do that because I don't think he wants to be remembered as the pot president as part of his legacy. So I think the DEA person leaving, I think that's probably a good thing. I think Loretta Lynch coming is probably not a good thing. But at the end of the day, for the next whatever, it's still Obama's show. Yes?
Are there any other cases or any other products that have this sort of dynamic where it's a states' rights versus federal regulation conundrum?
Well, there are other similar situations, but typically it's not illegal in the federal government. For example, the federal government was very good at manipulating the states to adopt the lower speed limit, for example, and they turned around, they tied that into the spending. So they turned around and said, well, we can't tell you what to do, but we can tell you we won't give you any funding unless you lower your speed limit to 55. So then magically everybody lowered their speed limits to 55. But not really, not really much where it's illegal on the federal level and it's legal on the state level. Now, just a quick digression, there's also, it's my last class on Tuesday, we're going to talk about it, there's also a international treaty which the U.S. is a signatory on, and basically says that's where they got the controlled substance language from. So, in the controlled substance, so if the federal government is bound by that treaty, so then query, can the federal government now legalize it here in the states and then not be in violation of the treaty? And the answer is probably no, as my eager friend is happy to say. But again, this recently Uruguay pulled out of it and everything else like that. And to me, I won't get political with you, but I think the UN is so inefficient, it doesn't matter what they say anyway. But I won't say that here. Yes.
Hi, excellent conversation here. I have a concern as far as I'm a physician that does the recommendations. And my patients have told me now that because of the registration process where they've gone for a background check, that certain employers have been able to find out that they are registered and have a medical marijuana card. And I've been also told that because it is in a Schedule 1, all of HIPAA goes out the window. Can you please comment on that?
Yes, it's a great question, and what's really more interesting than that is, and I guess James, you'll tell me if you want me to wind down. It seems people seem. We'll take 10 more, perfect. It's a great question. And first of all, the question was why, if she's writing a recommendation, and I guess you all know she can't write a prescription because it's illegal. So that's a material distinction. You can't write a prescription. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as it relates to medicine, I'm working with Montel Williams, who's very outspoken in the medical marijuana space, and we're working on some of the different states. And his mantra, which I've adopted as mine, is I am on record as saying I am pro-medical marijuana, because really what medical marijuana offers is a doctor another tool to recommend, if they so choose, to a patient. Not requiring it or anything else like that. So, and I think it really is very different than whatever your views, and I'm not questioning anyone's views on recreational marijuana, but it certainly is a different ilk. And whether it's a first step or not, it doesn't matter. The interesting thing is that many states now are having registries, and everybody hears all about that. Now, federal government can and has served a subpoena on a state and obtained the records of those people on the registry. So in effect, what you had, I think it was in Oregon a couple of years ago, the federal government served a subpoena on the state court in Oregon, and the state court was required to turn over those records. So effectively, that records of a federal crime were distributed, or disseminated, turned over to the federal government. Remarkable. And that's the stuff when everybody's all excited about the registries, because, that's the way to keep track of it. Nobody considers that implication. I bet you most people here never heard that as an issue, but everybody's good with the registry. So HIPAA, forget about HIPAA. The federal government's going to find out about it anyway. And you probably know, if you're an employee, if you work in a state where marijuana is legal in Colorado, you can still be fired from your job for testing positive for marijuana. Now, going to your point, how many times do you have a situation where an employee can be terminated for engaging in lawful conduct? Pretty wild. We got 9 more.
Regarding paraphernalia, so he said that, you know.
Regarding what?
Regarding marijuana paraphernalia, so AIDS or whatnot, bonds. What's the legal point on that? Because you said that you could get in trouble for paraphernalia, correct?
I'm the #1 apocalyptic expert on this because I brought my machine out just before the paraphernalia laws were about to be instated in 1979. The only people opposing them with the paraphernalia industry were a bunch of friends and souvenir dealers. I didn't know how to deal with it because it was absolutely unconstitutional. However, since my particular advice I had could also be used as a...
What was the question? The question whether paraphernalia, you can be involved in paraphernalia, is that the question?
You see paraphernalia everywhere.
Right, you can be involved in paraphernalia, yes.
Well, you can't.
Okay.
You cannot be involved in paraphernalia. It's absolutely illegal in the state of Massachusetts to buy it, to distribute it, to manufacture it, or to sell it. It is illegal in this state.
There's probably 25 public companies that do it, and I can give you a list of all the others. The answer is as long as you're not touching the plant, that's the picks and shovels, and that's the business that most people are getting in. I just came back from the marijuana investor conference, and there are people who are growing lights. There are people who are consulting. There's three professional consulting companies that are public today: American Cannabis, Medicine Man, all those companies that are advising as it relates to it. You have people that are growing lights for it. You have 3 public companies that are leasing land to marijuana growers. You have drawing a blank on that. So the answer is, generally speaking, that's what the businesses people are doing as it relates to those business. Any other questions?
It's legal in this state. And if you read the statute, it says
I'm not talking about
anything that is designed primarily, and the things you're discussing can be used, lights, or even bongs, for tobacco or growing other things.
So there's no head shops in Massachusetts?
None of them are selling items designed only for illegal.
Didn't say only for illegal substance. You can turn around and in a head shop. My understanding is I can tell you in New York, because I'm not a Massachusetts attorney. I can tell you in New York there are head shops in New York, and marijuana is not legal in the way it's sold.
When you call it a pet shop, you're just talking about things with multiple uses.
Are people in Maine, whether they're patients, caregivers, dispensary owners, any kind of business related to the cannabis industry, are they being represented fairly legally by counsel?
Well, the amazing thing in Maine, and I actually know this, in Maine, somebody reported someone stole their marijuana plants, and the cops had to actually go pick up the plant and return it back to the person in Maine, which was just remarkable. But no, the answer is obviously they're not getting, I don't know who's advising them, but the ethics prevent them from being advised.
So lawyers are not...
I can't tell you what lawyers are doing or not doing. I can tell you that the Bar Association does not allow them to do it. It's an ethical violation if they do it. Please.
Well, given that I just came back up from the investors conference, so just from the data ecosystem perspective of what are this marijuana stuff is going to grow here, it grows everywhere. So what's the international competition, and obviously there was a transportation, on that?
Yeah, the transportation is the big issue because the transportation is what violates the Department of Justice rules. Because once you cross state lines, so as long as you stay within the state, it's not a problem. The interesting point to the physician's point is because it's a crime here and it's a controlled substance, you can't actually do a substantial amount of scientific research for it here. So you have that catch-22. So ironically, the #1 country that's doing the scientific research is really Israel. And there's a lot of really good science coming. I don't know if you're aware of that. There's a lot of really good science coming out of Israel. So James, would you like me to wrap up now?
I'll take one more question.
Take 10 more. Go ahead. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. So you spoke earlier with the doctor about how if you're registered with the state, your employer, I just want to make it clear, it doesn't matter where your employer is, they can still ask for that information, or do they have to be in a state where marijuana is not allowed?
I don't know. If I wasn't clear, I apologize. Your employer you can be drug tested, okay? And if you can be terminated. There's a case in Rhode Island. There's a case now pending in the Supreme Court in Colorado. Whether or not you can be terminated for testing positive for marijuana. Now, some of the issues are, as the doctor I'm sure will confirm, if you can test for alcohols in your system for 12 hours or 18 hours, whatever it is. How long is marijuana in your system for?
Depends on the person.
Could be weeks. Okay, so it could be weeks. It could be long. Maybe she says it long. It could be weeks. She says months. It doesn't matter. My point is, it's more than a day. Okay, so you could have smoked over the weekend, and as the physician will attest, you could have smoked over the weekend and tested at work on Wednesday and be terminated for testing positive for drugs when it's legal in Colorado to smoke.
So it doesn't matter where your employer's, headquartered. It makes no difference. It's just if that's in their rules that are clear to you in their policy.
Right. It doesn't. Right. I mean, because this is Colorado, it's legal, and the dish case is the one pending before Colorado, where it is legal.
So some kind of quick question. On college campuses, it's illegal, it's better illegal. If they reschedule the drugs, do you think they'd lift that for college campuses? Where do you see that going?
I don't think they're going to carve out. I don't think they're going to. Personally, I'm not sure that they think that the college students should have special permission to get high. I'm not sure that's a federal policy. I mean, maybe it should be one. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but I'm not sure that they're going to carve it out so you can get high in college. I'm sorry that I didn't understand your question.